So what's going to be on an ASE test? Well, the information that ASE publishes is designed to answer that question. The way we do that is by creating separate test outlines for each test. They're all laid out in the same format. We start with the test specification, which identifies the general content areas of the test. And then the real meat of the information is the task list. The task list identifies the job skills that we as technicians perform in the shop every day. What's important about this very information is that the questions in the test relate directly back to the skills that we identify in the task list. This information is available to you before you ever come in and take an ASE certification test. So you can evaluate yourself, determine your study needs before you ever come into a test center. So let's learn more about this test information. How is it published? ASE publishes separate study guides for each test series, such as automobile, medium-heavy truck, and collision repair. Each study guide contains all the test specifications and task lists for each and every test that's available in that test series. So if you're an automobile technician and you're interested in becoming a master, we give you all the test information that you need for each and every test ASE offers in the automobile series in one place. So let's review the format for the ASE test information that's found in the study guide. We start with the test name, then we show you the test specification, and then following that is the task list. So what is a test specification? A test specification is really a test outline. It really takes all of the specialty areas of that particular test and breaks them down into subcomponents, which we call content areas. Those content areas are used to assign a specific number of questions that are going to be asked in that area of the test. So let's look at how that's done. If you've ever gotten an ASE score report, you see your score report is broken down in the same way. We show you the general content areas, we list them alphabetically, we tell you how many questions are in that area of the test, and of course on the score report we tell you how many questions you answered correctly. On the test specification we break down the percentages and tell you what percentage that number of questions represents in that test. The idea here is the weighting that is given to each content area gives you very good information about where the largest number of questions are going to be asked in a test. You may see a content area that encompasses 25% of the test. Well, you can see that the skills in that content area are deemed to be highly important with respect to the content associated with them. So what's a task list? A task list really identifies job skills by the content area. You might ask, well, why is the task list so important? Well, all of the test questions relate directly to the job skills. Now, what I want you to understand is, how do I use these tasks and this task list to help me to understand what I know and don't know technically about this level of diagnosis of an automobile? Let's use a couple of skills for example, and this happens to be from the A8 engine performance test. Skill number 5 reads, perform engine manifold vacuum or pressure test, determine needed action. There's a lot going on in that task. You have to ask yourself, what do I know about performing manifold vacuum or pressure tests? Do I perhaps know that you can perform tests in a loaded mode? You could perform a running compression test, running vacuum test. You could perform a cranking vacuum test. All of those tests are important when performing certain aspects of vehicle diagnosis. And a question could be asked about any number of those things to test your knowledge of that specific skill. So the idea is, if you read that skill and you feel that you don't have a full understanding of every aspect technically that relates to that skill, you've just identified an area where you need to study. Let's use another skill as an example. Perform cylinder power balance test, determine needed action. You have to ask yourself, well, what is a power balance test even looking for? Do I even understand what that test is trying to determine with respect to the integrity of the engine? How do I perform that test? And what are the things that I'm looking for when I'm performing that test? There may be a couple of different ways to perform that test, such as looking at RPM drop or coil KV. The idea is there may be multiple ways to perform a specific test, and we could ask you a question about that either way. If you don't feel you fully understand the concept of that task, you've again identified an area where you need to study. Let's use one more example. Perform cylinder cranking compression test, determine needed action. Well, you have to also think about the diagnostic aspects when performing a test. Do I know how to set up a compression test? Is the throttle position, whether it's open or closed while I'm performing that test, important? Does engine temperature matter? Those are all things that I need to consider about my knowledge of this skill, and I haven't even turned the key yet and performed a compression test. The other half of it is, after I do perform a cranking compression test, what am I looking for? What does high compression potentially mean? What does low compression mean? You have to understand that there's different aspects to every diagnosis that helps to lead you to the failure in the engine that's your job as a technician to diagnose. The important thing is ASE provides this technical information and these test outlines in the task list to help you evaluate how you match up to the skills associated with that area so that you can find deficiencies in your knowledge before you come in and take the test. So what I wanted to illustrate with these few tasks is the method and approach to using ASE test information to help you to evaluate your specific needs to answer the question, what do I need to study to pass an ASE test?